Welcome back to the Gas Compression Podcast. I'm excited to be joined by Chad Brahler of ACI Services. Chad's been in this industry for over 30 years, and he's currently the president at ACI Services, and he's also the director of Recompress. It's a 50-50 joint venture with PSI Con BV in the Netherlands. He's also a Navy officer that is still serving our country, and he's involved with energy infrastructure security. So we'll get to hear a little bit about that. So, Chad, welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
Yeah, well, let's start with your background. You've been at ACI for about 20 years.
Actually, yeah, 20 years here this June.
Okay.
I mean, it's been 20 years ago. Norm Shade had invited me to join. Actually, right about this time 20 years ago when I was in Rochester, New York. So.
All right. Well, Norm was the first guest on my podcast, so we know Norm. Well, how did you get how'd you get started? Tell me about where you grew up, where you went to school, and kind of how you got in the industry.
Kind of in a circuitous route, but I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, actually right outside of Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. And of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I was probably just a few miles just from the Grove City, Pennsylvania Cooper Bessemer plant, and wasn't even aware of it, of course, until my wife, her father-in-law, or not her, my father-in-law, her dad actually worked for Cooper since 1961. And so as we were dating and as, we got engaged and got married, and I kind of realized what Cooper was. And when I was, getting ready to graduate from college, he was kind of pushing me a little bit to apply to Cooper, although I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted. But anyhow, just kind of, circling back as far as like my school. So I went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York, and actually graduated with a marine systems engineering degree, which is pretty much a mechanical engineering degree, just with pretty much a highly focused intent on marine systems. So diesel engines, pumps, boilers, things like that. So it was actually a really good fit, although I didn't think it was at the time for Cooper. So anyhow, when I graduated, I had applied a number of places, ended up working for Caterpillar for a period of time. And I get a call.
Were they on the East Coast?
Actually on their, I was a service engineer for the diesel 3600 line, which would have been the mid 90s. And this was in Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay.
So I had actually worked at the plant there in Lafayette for a period of time.
Okay.
But of course, my route growing up in Western PA and going back to visit family, we would always go by the Springfield, Ohio plant for Cooper. And it just so happened my father-in-law had connections there. And the director of human resources knew I was coming by one day. He said, "Hey, just stop in, just want to talk." And sure enough, I did. One thing led to another. That's when I went to work for Cooper. And this would have been the late 90s or mid 90s. So anyhow, I ended up at Cooper, but I ended up in Springfield, Ohio, ended up as a service engineer on their Superior product line, mainly on the engine side, which of course, unfortunately is really, no longer in the market today.
Mm-hmm.
Actually spent quite a bit of time on, at the time, what was known as the 2400 product, which was the Japanese diesel engine that was gasified for Superior. And then, I was with Cooper for a number of years. It's where I first got to know Norm. He had convinced me to, stay with Cooper, make a move to Houston. And then, unfortunately, Houston just wasn't really the right choice for me and my family. So we ended up moving back to the Northeast. I had actually left the industry for maybe a year, well, actually about 2 years. I was selling water treatment chemicals for Nelco Water. Didn't necessarily leave the energy side of it because I was selling water treatment chemicals for boilers and a bunch of other, major, large like power infrastructure, wastewater facilities, things like that. And then out of the blue, Norm had left Cooper and ended up with ACI, and he was able to track me down and asked me if I was interested in coming back to the industry. And that's what he did 20 years ago, and here I am.
So you moved to Ohio.
So we moved, yeah. So then we moved. We actually at that time we were in Rochester, New York, and we moved to here to right outside of Cambridge. We're actually in St. Clairsville, Ohio, is where I'm at now.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about ACI. You guys have been a staple in the industry for a long time. We've done some stuff in our shop, cylinders that you guys have done. But for those of our listeners out there that don't know anything about ACI, tell us about what ACI does and what you guys are up to. And first of all, what does it stand for? I've never heard. I've never heard over 15 years. I've never knew what it stood for.
So if it actually doesn't stand for anything today, and that's just due to just how the business has been kind of bought and sold over the years. But if you actually go back through the history, at one time it was a company called Anglo Compression Inc., hence ACI. However, with a gentleman by the name of Jack Youngs had actually bought the company in 1999, and when he purchased the company, that name didn't actually transfer. So he just kept the acronym, just the letters, the ACI letters. So really doesn't stand for anything. Although the three letters, the ACI, have been around and kind of associated with the business probably since would have been probably the mid 80s. But when you look at the business itself, we've actually been doing what almost kind of like what we do today since 1960. The business started out as Yorty Machine in Nelsonville, Ohio. And primarily what Yorty Machine was doing was manufacturing all the valves essentially for Cooper Bessemer. And at the time, Cooper, was of course, located primarily there in Mount Vernon, Ohio. So we were a fairly significant supplier, throughout the 60s to Cooper Bessemer, primarily on the valves. Now you kind of fast forward a little bit into like the late 60s, early 70s. A lot of the aftermarket type companies were starting to come on board into the industry. And at the time, Yorty Machine had recognized that there were some gaps in the marketplace, and it was looking to take advantage of that, and kind of created an engineering marketing arm within Yorty Machine, and it became known as Compressor Valve Services. So this would have been like late 60s and then early 70s. So Compressor Valve Services kind of started up primarily focusing on engineered products. And this is all just focused on reciprocating compression. We as ACI, even when we were Compressor Valve Services and even Yorty Machine, we never really ventured much further away from reciprocating compressors. I mean, that's where our expertise is, and that's where we focus pretty much all of our resources. So throughout the 70s, we really started focusing on engineered products, pistons, liners, and even into cylinder bodies, in towards the late 70s, and then even into the 80s, the business had grown considerably, caught the eyes of some private equity, and got purchased by a company called Anglo Energy in the 80s, and hence a new name kind of formed, and that was Anglo. I actually didn't begin that. We actually were a part of Anglo Energy until Anglo Energy went bankrupt in the 80s, as many energy companies did. And at the time, the former employees of CVS actually purchased the company back, and that's when it became Anglo Compression Inc. And again, we primarily did exactly what we were doing in the 70s. I mean, pretty much engineered products for reciprocating compressors. And that has continued even when a gentleman by the name of Jack Youngs had purchased the business in 1999. And then even into what we do today. And it's we have built, all of our team, all of our experience has been really centered on, reciprocating compressors. And what we primarily do is we primarily look pretty much from the crosshead guide out, and we're able to offer solutions, for those components. We get a lot into projects. We do a lot of compressor reapplication work. But when you look at what our core today is, we do a lot of cylinder body designs, primarily for a lot of the equipment that may not have an OEM today, because there are, some out there, of course, over the years, as companies are bought and sold, we're able to fill that gap where the OEM may not exist today, or that product may have been sunsetted by the OEM, because there's a lot of those where they don't want to support it just because of other product lines that have come out. Well, we're able to fill that gap, and we do that quite often.
So who's someone that reaches out to you, somebody that has like you said, legacy equipment, something that's been sunsetted, and they need to recylinder something, and so you guys can come in there and engineer a whole new everything but the engine.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, a great example, it actually wasn't that long ago, a company by the name of World Energy, which was a renewable refinery out in LA. they actually, in the refinery, they had some Clark CMB2 compressors that they actually wanted to duplicate because that's what they had. They had some pieces and parts, they had some inventory in order to, support that product that was in the refinery. So they actually needed another unit that was going to be pretty much like the one they had. So what we were able to do is we were able to basically fill that gap. We were able to, in this case, we actually found a used compressor frame, but we, reconditioned it to 0 hour. But the cylinders themselves, they had a change in their operating conditions. So we actually engineered and designed new compressor cylinders that went onto an existing, or onto a new, well, what we would call new, but it was a used frame that we 0 houred. And then we were able to package that compressor with a new motor, on a new skid, new coolers, new everything, and actually gave them a complete new package that mimicked that package that was built, I think in this case, probably in the 60s.
Wow.
So, I mean, we find ourselves doing that quite often. I mean, another example for a refinery up in Regina, they had an old integral engine. It was a Worthington SLCC that actually caught on fire. It just so happened it was a compressor that we recylindered about 20 years prior. And then once it caught on fire, we actually took those cylinders and put them onto a different frame for them that we had located on the used market as well, and gave them a complete package to replace that unit that actually caught on fire. So we find ourselves doing a lot of those type of projects because they're unique, they're different, and they're not straightforward. It's not, go get product A, put it here. It's, you got to go figure out how to make it all work.
Yeah, so you guys are problem solvers. So if someone just needs a package to go set, and they're not calling you. They've got a problem that they can't figure out or can't get something for. They're going to call you to design something, a one-off.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's times I even, I would tell the team, it would be nice if we would get calls for the easy stuff.
Yeah.
We don't. We tend to get the calls where somebody you just can't figure it out. That's usually when we get involved.
Have you guys developed any software that's kind of proprietary to what y'all do? I know there's the ERCM stuff that that you do training on and stuff like that. What's that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that, as far as some of our core capability is actually compressor performance. I mean, when you look at, a lot of the individuals that had worked for the business for Compressor Valve Services and for ACI, they were probably some of the best thermodynamicists in the marketplace. Bill Hartwick, Ed Miller, and it just so happens Ed Miller trained a gentleman by the name of Dwayne Hickman, who's on my team today. And Dwayne has played a key role not only for us when it comes to compressor performance, but he has also assisted actually a number of the OEMs out there today in development of their performance program, because of the the expertise that we've been able to bring together and that we've been able to kind of package into ERCM. So when it comes to, the ability to do compressor performance, I mean, we have the, through ERCM, we have the ability basically to do, performance model for just about every make and model compressor out there. So I would say, yes. So that allows us to do a lot of what we do as well.
So if somebody's having issues with their with their units, they can put your software in, have you guys come take a look.
Well, the way the software works is, I mean, if they got a change in operating conditions, if they're looking to say, hey, is my compressor as it's configured today, am I able to meet these new conditions? If not, then what do I have to do in order to meet those new conditions? So basically it gives you that tool to allow you to, be able to take that unit as it's configured to what it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then how you can go about doing it. It just allows you to do that modeling, if you will, for that unit.
Right.
We have been able to take, I mean, one of the other things that we're doing with ERCM is once you're able to build out that model, we then have the ability through ERCM Express to basically put it into your unit PLC, where you can then actually run compressor performance real time. Particularly as the market starts going to like the whole digital twin concept, the whole condition monitoring, starting to look at, how do I, start doing some evaluation, if you will, of how my units are running. We have the ability then to take that model, because essentially you need that theoretical performance in order to even, start making any decisions on whatever it is that your equipment is doing. But we have the ability to take that model and run it real time, within your unit PLC, or even within like a SCADA system, and as many plants will have up in the cloud.
So something unique that you guys recently announced was a joint venture with a company in the Netherlands. And am I saying
Right.
that right? It's PSICon BV?
Yeah, just Sycon. So
SciCon.
the P silent, yeah.
SciCon PV. Okay, well, how did that come about? And I'm really interested to hear what it's like operating in the European market because we've never talked to anybody about that. So how'd that come about?
Yeah, but the European market is different, when you start comparing it and compare and contrast it to what here's, domestic to US. But how it came about, the primary owner of Sycon is a gentleman by the name of Frank Coper. And I got to know Frank over the years, just us actually being a supplier to him and supporting his business, Sycon, as he would go after, optimization type projects, and as well as, the ability to, re-engineer, components, for his business. So we found ourselves working together quite extensively, since about 2005 to through today, and then kind of when COVID hit, we found ourselves actually really struggling with the supplier network in some regard. Particularly, we were struggling with castings, we were struggling with some other raw materials. So we started looking outside of the United States, and we were starting to focus on Europe and the capability that some of the companies, the foundries there would have in order to support our business. Couple that with raw material costs were kind of going through the roof when you started looking at like raw steel prices, and even just the raw material that was going to go into castings. I mean, the costs were getting rather expensive. So we were looking for alternative means. So as we were doing that, him and I were talking, we're like, okay, why don't we just figure out how we can essentially replicate what ACI does in the US here in Europe. That way we can utilize a local supply network here in Europe, and we don't have to worry about shipping costs as well as that shipping time, as far as getting product from the US into Europe. So as we started looking at that, we came to the conclusion that, with his network and his relationships, we would be able to build upon them and then bring the knowledge that ACI has, particularly, when it comes to cylinder design and component design. We would then just be able to replicate a lot of what ACI does here in Cambridge, Ohio, but do it in actually just right outside of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So that's kind of how it came about. I mean, the two of us, we worked together for many years, and we found, our relationship to be extremely beneficial to each other, and we're just, taking advantage of how we could grow that.
So what's going on in the European market? I mean, is it a lot of the same projects that you're doing in the US, same kind of things, or what's different? What's similar to operating
Well,
over there?
I mean, you see a lot of the same projects. I mean, where it's a lot different is we have a vast gas transmission network where Europe doesn't have the same transmission network, particularly related to natural gas. So you don't see a lot of those dynamics here. What you see a lot of there would be more of the downstream activity. So I mean, you see a lot of similar projects, like a fertilizer plant looking to upgrade their CO2 compressor. I mean, that's no different in Germany as it is in Nebraska.
Hmm.
So you see a lot of that. I mean, the other thing you see, I think, in the European market is, the advantage of hydrogen. I mean, I think they are a little bit further ahead than we are when it comes to how they utilize hydrogen. Granted, although hydrogen compression's been going on for decades, but there's definitely a lot more hydrogen projects that we've been looking at there as well. But when you really take a look at, I mean, the dynamics are the same when it comes to projects. It's just that the network is a little bit different, and it's primarily that midstream and gas transmission segment really doesn't exist in Europe as it does here.
How about the labor force over there? I mean, does SciCon, I mean, they have plenty of engineers and technicians and mechanics. Are they kind of in the same boat that we are over here? How's that over there?
I mean, I think we definitely struggle here, but I mean, I don't think it's any different there as far as finding the right people for the right seat that you have available. I mean, it's always a challenge. I mean, there's definitely some labor laws there that are different here. When here in Ohio, we're a, employee at will state. I mean, whereas if you're going to hire in the Netherlands, it's a little bit more difficult if you happen to find the wrong person, and you do hire them. So, I mean, there are some labor laws that are different, but the same challenges exist as far as being able to find the right people.
Yeah. Um, how about I'm curious, did anything change whenever, when Russia kind of cut off the gas to the natural gas to Western Europe? Did that change anything for y'all? Did that affect y'all at all?
As far as our business, we didn't necessarily see any impact. I mean, some of the projects that we've been involved in, unfortunately, they weren't necessarily tied to a lot of that activity. So we didn't see anything as a result of it.
Hmm.
I mean, we take a look at the business that we have there. I mean, what we have been doing actually, for the most part, have actually been plant upgrades and CO2 plants. We've done a few, and then we've also been doing some work actually even outside of Europe. I mean, we've done some things in Southeast Asia, as well as some other areas. But again, they've just all been kind of project work.
So what's the outlook from your perspective for 2024, both here in the States and with Recompress? Get out your crystal ball and tell
that
me
fuzzy,
tell me what's going to happen for the
yeah,
rest of
that
2024.
fuzzy
Because
ball that we all wish we had the ability to see through that cloud that's in there.
yeah, I know it seems like all of us in the energy industry of some sort, some degree, are always optimistic, right? We're always the boom's right around the corner, all that stuff. But
Well,
I'm
you're
just
always one
curious.
day closer to a boom, and you're always one day closer to to the market falling, I think.
That's right. So just as far as what you're feeling, I mean, orders coming in and just how you're feeling this year is going to look.
Yeah, I mean, when you take a look at our business, I mean, I think we operate probably about 6 months behind where the industry really is. And a lot of that has to do just because of how we get involved in projects and how we support the industry. So we do operate with a backlog. I mean, it's not uncommon for us to have projects in our backlog that are here for maybe 6 months to even a year. I mean, unfortunately, there are times we even have projects that may transcend longer than a year. So our backlog sometimes isn't extremely indicative as to maybe what the market is doing. There are certain segments of our business, particularly, we do support aerial, with providing them performance control devices. So that segment of our business does have a little bit of volatility to however that market is going to go because we're directly tied to the aerial market. I mean, if I were to, the way we've been kind of looking at this year, 2024, we've been looking at 2024 pretty much being kind of the same as 2023. We weren't really projecting any growth, and we really weren't projecting a retraction in our business. But as we start looking out even beyond, unfortunately, we're actually booking projects today for 2025, which is good and which is bad, but but a lot of that's just due to how our deliveries will work on cylinders in particular, and how we get castings, how we get forging. So, I mean, as we look at, we're actually predicting, I think there's going to be a little bit of growth, but in our business, but I don't think that's going to be indicative of what the industry is going to do. And the challenge we have is our business is made up of natural gas, midstream gas transmission stuff, as well as API 618 and chemical plant stuff. We're about a 50-50 split. And we did that on purpose because as the volatility that you see in that midstream gas transmission, natural gas realm, you don't see that same volatility in the downstream business.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're able to manage our downstream business, we can sometimes level load our backlog and hence, keep a fairly level load within our business. So we do that by design because we never know where the natural gas market's going to go.
Right.
The downstream and the API 618, how we're involved. I mean, we're able to get involved in the budget cycle, and we're able to get involved in projects that have a much longer gestation period. So the stuff we're working on today is stuff that's going to become orders in 2025 and possibly 2026. So we have some visibility there, and that helps keep the volatility low on our side. But we're bullish. I mean, we are bullish about what's going to happen, towards the end of this year into next year. I mean, we've seen our order rate actually here in the first quarter be a little bit stronger than what it was last year. So if that's an indication, then we think we're going to and we think our year may be a little bit better.
Good to hear. Well, let's kind of wrap up. I'd love to hear about your service in the Navy and what you're continuing to do. How long have you been an officer in the Navy?
So I've been I actually had 27 years because I'm actually trying to retire this year. When I was 17, I actually joined the Army. But I was still in high school, and because I figured that was my way to pay for college. But then I was fortunate. I got my nomination. I got accepted to a military school, the Merchant Marine Academy. That's how I got my commission. So I received my commission in the late 90s, 27 years ago. So,
Wow. And
and I've
so, what are you continuing to do? You mentioned earlier when we talked earlier about energy infrastructure security. So what's that?
Yeah, so what I do today, and I've been doing it for the last few years, is I've been supporting actually the Navy Postgraduate School, and they've got a mission where they do tabletop exercises with countries that are either looking to join NATO and or had recently just joined NATO. And the focus of these exercises, in this case, they've been kind of centered on energy infrastructure. And there's usually even a little bit more of a stronger focus, but primarily, as you start taking a look at these countries, like actually the Ukraine was one of them. The Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia would be some other great examples. Historically, they've been pretty much reliant upon Russia, and a lot of their energy infrastructure was tied to Russia, natural gas as well as power, pretty much everything. So as they join NATO and or wish to join NATO, there are things that they have to do in order to prove their independence. Because as they're part of the NATO organization, they can't have the reliance upon Russia. So there's a lot of things that they have to do or that they have done. So what these tabletop exercises do is they tend to focus on how resilient their infrastructure is. So what we've been primarily focusing on here in the past year is actually cyber defense. And then they would take a look at basically create a scenario that if something were to happen, what does this country and the entities within that country, what do they have the ability to do? How would they approach that issue? So I mean, as an example, I think here in the last November, we were actually wargaming the only reason I'm hesitating, I got to make sure what I say though.
Yeah, sure.
So we were basically wargaming some things that were occurring in the North Sea, and then how those things that were happening, how do they impact, the Baltic region countries, and what did they have the ability to do, and what did they have the legality to do, and what could they not do? So they would kind of go through all those different scenarios. So what we do as part of the group that I'm involved in is we primarily we're evaluators. We not only watch what they're doing, we kind of record what they're doing, but we also identify like the best practices based off of our knowledge and our expertise that we're able to bring, because we're bringing in experts, from all over different industries and also different government entities, particularly here within the United States, as well as other parts of the world, to help guide them, as they look at different things and whether or not they need to implement any best practices or something. So we've been doing that. I've been doing that now, well, probably about 5 years.
Man, that seems like a lot of fun. I'm just
It's
hearing you talk about it, kind of wargaming and just getting involved in that. That just kind of seems like a fun project that you get to
no,
do
I tell
outside
you
of
what,
it.
it's definitely enjoyable. I mean, I'm extremely proud of my service, and I'm extremely fortunate that I've had the opportunity to do some of the things that I've done. So.
Like, how much time do you spend on that? Does that take up a considerable amount of time, or does it go in
It
chunks? Or
it depends.
yeah,
I mean, typically it's a few hours a week, unless prior to like an exercise is probably going to be a little bit more, and after an exercise is going to be a little bit more because we have a lot of prep work we have to do, then we have a lot of follow up and report writing that we would do in these cases. But I mean, I'm also on the hook to get called up and be deployed, which I've done. I've done it a couple times. So when that happens, it's all the time. So,
hmm. Well, thank you for your service, and
all my pleasure.
man, good luck in, I guess, retirement. So you're looking to retire this year?
That's my objective. I mean, I'm currently a commander, so I'm an 05 in the Navy. So I'm limited to how much time we could do. And actually, my time is coming up. I only got about a year left
Hmm.
that I can legally do, because we have we're based on your rank, you're limited to how many years you can actually be in
Hmm.
without having somebody give you a waiver, if you will. But I'm not in a position where I can get a waiver. So
Well, Chad, it was great talking to you, and I'm going to go with your your optimism, and look at 2024 and possibly 25 as a bullish year for all of us in the gas compression industry. So, if
I like
people
to
want
think I'm
to,
right, but I got it's 50-50, right?
it's 50-50. So, if people want to check out what ACI is doing, it's just is it ACIservices.com?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, ACIservice.com. They can find you on LinkedIn or on the web. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate you giving us the history and all that you're up to at ACI. And again, thank you for your service and all the cool stuff you're doing out there.
No, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.